I got a notification that's like, hey, do you want to join Oxide and Friends? I was like, I guess. I don't know. What are they talking about?
I don't know, man. Those guys are kind of turkeys. They never intro their guests. That's what I've heard about that.
It's a persistent theme.
I got to tell you that I feel disoriented. I'm just got a little bit of a confession. Adam, as you know, I recently celebrated a bit of a milestone birthday. I'm 50. And boy, I generally do not feel 50, except when I am in someone else's Discord when I feel like I'm 95. I feel like feel like I'm in a high school party looking for my teenagers and unable to find them. And I'm like, I should.
And you're getting looks.
And you're getting looks like I should not be here. I am seeing things that I cannot unsee, and I really just want to like do my business and get out of here. So I apologize to all those. So this, all right. Well, you know, now Adam, I'm doing exactly the thing that you say I do.
How many okay boomer jokes are allowed in the next hour?
All of them.
Oh, that's already a hot button take right there.
Okay, all of them, because I would just like, for the record, there was a generation between millennials and baby boomers. It's the one that Adam and I are in. So anyway.
Which is just, that's the whole joke already. We've had the joke now. It's excellent.
The forgotten generation.
It's
nope, not that one. Not that one.
No. There's the silent generation, and then there's you guys, the forgotten generation.
Yes. What are you saying? What are you saying? They talk too much? Jeez.
Listen, in an effort to not forget ourselves, we actually gave our whole generation a name. A name that was then cribbed by subsequent generations, classic Gen X. Anyway, all right, I'm doing the thing. I'm so sorry. So, all right, I would like.
What an intro.
Yeah, what an intro. Welcome to Oxide and Friends, everybody. Really excited to have some terrific guests here. So we've got last week we had the launch of the MI300 and a bunch of folks in town, and among them were George Cosma of Chips and Cheese and Jordan Reynos from Storage Review. So welcome, guys. Was great to see you last week. Both of you were up at Oxide, nerding out with some bunch of computers. And it's great to have you here to talk about this MI300 launch. So thanks for coming by.
Yeah, appreciate you having us. This is a lot of fun to be here. It was a lot of fun to come out and visit too and see what you guys got going on firsthand. It was recommended by our Discord actually, and they said, "Hey, who are these guys?" And I came and found out.
What a modern love story! It's our Discord's got us together. You know, isn't that's so? That's great. Adam, you were informing me that in Twitch parlance, this has like a name when you get. So what
this is called? This is a raid. So we've got
raid, RAID.
There you go. A whole crew of someone's fan base showing up. Usually it's like kind of a passing of the baton, not sort of the Jetsons meet the Flintstones like we're doing here. But yeah, I think a raid still applies.
More Jetsons plus Flintstones. I feel this is more like a crossover.
Yeah, but that's a Gen X reference that only you and I get.
I'd like some clarification on which one of us is the Jetsons.
Actually understand that reference?
Okay, you can make a Jetsons reference though. Surely. Why am I doing this? I'm just getting frustrated. And I guess I can make a Kiss and Led Zeppelin reference. I'm trying to think like the super group. I think anyway, whatever. It's great to have you here. It's great to have our three tribes, I guess, because you guys George, you got the Chips and Cheese crew as well. So we've got bringing everyone together to talk MI300. So it's a pretty interesting launch, something we've had our eye on here at Oxide for a long period of time. But Jordan, do you maybe want to kick us off in terms of what brought you down here for it and what you saw that was interesting in the launch on whenever it was, Wednesday?
Oh man, there was actually a lot of there were some subtle points that were really interesting. We Kevin's our lab director. He came out with me to San Jose for the AMD event. We went into it kind of expecting less than was actually delivered. In that's not a dig at AMD. It was more of a AMD's always had kind of an underdog, good value, a good product for the money. And we weren't expecting them to come out of the gate swinging like that with such a robust, I mean, between the X and the A, right? So I think it's important for the audience to understand when we say MI300, we're talking more about a series of stuff. Yeah. We're not talking about one specific product, because in my head, at least, they're two very distinct things with two very distinct applications. The X is more of what you would think of as a traditional GPU, right? The H100, the A100, the H200, that sort of thing. Where the A is closer to what would be the NVIDIA analog of a Grace Hopper, right? A CPU and GPU combined. And they came out of the gate with that. They came off the top rope, and they really they laid down something that was it wasn't expected. Let's just say that it's looking really good on paper. All the things that AMD is telling us about it, all the things that we're hearing from partners are really good. It's going to be, this is going to be really interesting to see as another competitor enters the space on it.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting. And I'm sure you've heard the same things we've heard about, like, no, it's got to be NVIDIA. It's got to be NVIDIA. Anything other than NVIDIA's, CUDA has got this incredible moat, which obviously all true. But I do think that, especially with the difficulty in getting parts, and Jordan, you'd point out to me that's like, hey, if I want to buy an H1, if I want to rent an H100 by the minute, I can do that right now. If I want to actually buy one, I'm going to be waiting for a long time. And let alone if I want to buy, 10 or 100 or 1,000. And I think people are realizing that actually it is good for the industry to have a choice here. That actually having a single dominant player with absolutely no competition whatsoever is really not good for us all collectively. And I just feel like, and Jordan, George, I'd love to get your take on this too, but because it feels to me like the zeitgeist is beginning to shift, and people were saying that, like, it's got to be NVIDIA. I was like, actually, you know what? Maybe this AMD stuff has actually got a shot, and boy, the hardware is awfully interesting. So maybe it's worth getting, making sure that PyTorch works well, or some of these other things that work at parity.
So at least in terms of the hardware, right? I would say that this is almost AMD's playbook at this point. If you look at Epic, they did this exact same thing. So you can sort of analogize MI200 with Epic Rome. Sorry, Epic Milan. Not Milan. Jeez.
Naples.
Italian city names. Naples. Thank you.
Naples. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Sorry. Italian city names. I do apologize. But yes, Epic Naples. And that's
interesting. So Naples, in that, like, Naples is the first real, I mean, this is where AMD is basically dead on the operating table when they come out with Naples, and and Naples ends up being more of a study for these future architectures. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, and you can, so you saw sort of with Naples the first chiplet where AMD was heading, right? And you could see that with MI200 where they were also heading for MI300, and it was both Naples and MI200 sort of just. It was AMD saying, "Hey, we're here, right? We exist.
Right. We're alive. Don't bury me. Don't close the coffin lid. I'm alive. I have Naples."
For Rome and for MI300, it was AMD saying, "We're here. Pay attention."
Yeah. Interesting.
So it's going to be interesting to see what MI400 does. If it's going to be sort of what Milan was. Now, granted, NVIDIA is not Intel. They're not sitting on their back end or stuck with process node issues. So it's interesting to see the competition heat up.
And do you think that, and what do you think about internal, because the software story has been the criticism for AMD, and but do you agree that it seems that there is more willingness to look at non-NVIDIA architectures, specifically AMD, from those folks that are kind of at the coalface of the stuff than there has been historically?
So I'm going to take that in two parts. I'm going to take the software story, and then I'm going to take the looking at someone other than NVIDIA. For the software story, yes, that is the big crux for anyone adopting AMD. And it's that AMD software stack, it's not CUDA. Like
Right.
it's Rockham is, I can't believe it's not CUDA, but worse. For
Okay.
so to speak.
Okay, do you
That's
understand?
harsh.
Well, no, but
Yeah,
you also
okay.
understand that you're making
I'm
bullseye
being
kind of
harsh
reference,
because I care,
right?
right? And why I say worse is not in that it's not universal, right? And even if you write code for, say, RDNA 2 or 3, there are certain code paths that, because of whatever reason, if you try and port that code up to the MI series, it just won't port without recompiling it.
Yeah.
And that's because of just different things between the architectures. So it's a story of, I know that AMD has been pushing for it, and a lot of people outside of AMD have been pushing for better and better software. And from what we've seen at the event, and from what I was told, it looks like that there's finally starting to become a push towards more software on the consumer side, which is
Yeah.
very, very, very good.
And
I'd
George,
even-
yeah, sorry, George, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say I'd even go a step further and just say, it's classic AMD. The drivers and software will come.
Yeah, and you do have to sort of give it. A lot of people are like, well, AMD's making money. Where's my software? Where's my software? It doesn't move that quickly, right? Milan was really where AMD sort of started getting its foothold and true movement in the data center, right?
I mean, to be fair, this is where the analogy breaks down a little bit, because it's like, Naples and Milan and in general, they all execute x86 code. Like, you can have some pretty old, crufty x86 code that will execute on those parts, versus like, if you've got CUDA, it's like you're porting it to Rockham. I mean, there's a lot more lift involved. So George, do you feel that, like, I can't believe it's not CUDA? Which I would like to point out is, do you know what that's a reference to? When you say I can't believe it's not CUDA, do you know what you're implicitly making a reference to? I'd just like to add.
I can't believe it's not butter. Yes.
Okay, so I can't believe it's. How does I can't believe it's not butter? That's surely a trapped in the 80s. Why do I I can't make a Jetsons reference, but I can't believe it's not butter. Oh, whatever. I'm not. You know what? I'm not even going to go there. But so do you feel that Rockham is beginning to get out from underneath that? Because it certainly felt that way with some of the enthusiasm that we saw from partners on Wednesday. But do you feel that they're beginning to get out from underneath some of that?
So at least in my community, right? Rockham, I believe it was 5.5, 5.6, and 5.7. Specifically 5.7 were actually very warmly received. And because there were some very big updates there. That were very, very, very welcome.
So let me ask you another thing, because, Jordan, I wondered if this is one of the things that you found. I want to get to, you said you found some things surprising with the launch. I found some things a bit surprising with the launch too, even though, obviously we, like you, have known about MI300 for a long time and knew roughly what was going to be launched. But, the way it's presented is always interesting. And I loved seeing, and this is not new for them, but it was great to see the emphasis on open source for that software. Which is a real contrast to what we see out of NVIDIA. And I thought that were you expecting that strong emphasis on open source? Because I think that's part of the reason, you said that with AMD, the drivers are going to get better, but it ain't going to get better if it's proprietary. Being open is a really important part of that.
Yeah, that's up there on my list of things that were, I would say it wasn't a huge surprise for it, but it's up there on the list of things that were okay. That's impressive. It's a strong stance that Intel has taken as well, right? With OpenVINO and in going their route. Open sourcing this kind of stuff only has one effect, and that's bettering the community, right? I'm a firm believer in open the code, open it up.
That does not feel like, it doesn't feel like you've got some great business insight there, but that somehow this eludes some other companies that, like, hey, if you sell hardware, open sourcing the software is only in your best interests, actually. But I'm glad to see AMD get that. So yeah, okay, that's interesting. So that you were a bit surprised by because I felt the same way, like not shocked, but good to see. What were some of the things that surprised you?
Specifically around kind of the architecture and the amount of, I mean, like the raw engineering prowess that went into the MI300 series between both the A and the X. We got some really technical deep dives on like thermal analysis, and you could tell they put a lot of time and effort into thinking about, okay, we can pump, 500, 700, 900 watts through these chips, but how do we get the heat out? Right? That's a completely different conversation than the one we've been having, but it was something really impressive nonetheless, talking about I can't think of the exact term, I'm sure George knows, but it's like the micro tunneling inside the silicon to help remove the heat. It was just like, wow, like, okay, these guys came out swinging. And then when you get to things like the MI300A, right, and you compare it to something like Grace Hopper, MI300 Haze, has a single address space. It's not two distinct things. So you're talking now performance of the applications itself. So we're getting.
So could you describe the 300A? Because I think this is a big part of why we're interested in this. I think it's a big part of why you're interested in this. Yeah, so just describe the architecture of the 300A a little bit.
So George, keep me honest here. So the MI300A is what AMD calls an APU. So a lot like their old desktop and laptop chips, but on super steroids in the Arnold Schwarzenegger workout program with some Joe Rogan mixed in there. It's got 24 cores that are all SMT enabled. They're Zen 4 cores, so they're the kind of like the Genoa iteration. Those are hooked up directly to the, I want to say 121 gigabytes. George, is that right?
So it's 256 megabytes of infinity cache, and then the memory is 128 gigabytes.
128 gigabytes of
120 gigabytes of HBM.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Which that in itself, right, from a programming perspective, when you're handling these apps and you're going through the how you're doing different calls and how you're building the software stack, right? This is why this is such a paradigm shift in my head. AMD has an uphill battle in getting the software ready so you can lift and shift like a model at a Hugging Face. But it's a very different way of thinking about how you interact with a very powerful accelerator like that, right? So you've got this CPU, an x86 CPU, that's essentially just hanging out in a hot tub of HBM with the accelerator. And man, the options that can come out of that, like just thinking about it is kind of wild.
I'm a little taken back by the hot tub metaphor. Is not one that occurred to me, and I just now my brain is going all sorts of different ways there with the chilling in the hot tub of HBM.
Well, there's a lot of heat in there too, so it came naturally.
Very hot. Yeah, it's a scalding tub. Actually, it's actually boiling. And that I think is part of why we are so interested in it is because historically the GPU has kind of been this accelerator sitting on the other side of a PCIe bus, and it's been a device. And it's been a super fancy device, and it's been one that has got this proprietary interconnect and proprietary way of talking to it and so on, but it's been a device. And I think actually pulling this on package and having this be a chiplet that's now sitting alongside your general CPU chiplets, to me, it's like the package becomes the computer, at least that the high performance part of the computer is the package. And you begin to solve a bunch of problems that you have when you have stratified the system. I mean, I like Jordan, you pointing out that like you've got actually now you can address memory. You can address this HBM from either the compute side or from the APU side, which is opens up a lot of opportunity to develop a truly unified system, which I think has been part of the challenge of the GPUs as we have implemented them. And George, if you were to squint at this, and I think Jordan may have already set you off on this because you could look at MI300A and say, like, okay, well, that's pretty similar to Grace Hopper, NVIDIA's Grace Hopper. When we were talking about this last week, you had some thoughts that maybe like actually we shouldn't think of these things as being, maybe they have some architectural similarities, but there are a lot of differences too. Can you elaborate on some of their differences?
So at the highest of the high level, yes, you could say that they are competing products. However, their implementation is almost the polar opposite of each other.
Yeah.
You have AMD taking the approach of a fully unified memory space that is cache coherent at the cache line level, right? So you can actually share 128 byte cache lines between the CPU and the GPU. Whereas in Grace Hopper, it's not one memory space, it's two memory spaces, and there's some trickery pokery with figuring out what's being accessed when and who by who more often, and it gets shuffled about. It's more
It sounds like it would just be harder to program too. I mean, is that not?
Yeah. So if you go and you look at their programming guide, it's you can tell that this is not as elegant, so to
Right.
speak.
There's a big seam.
Yeah. It's not as elegant as MI300A is. Now you can argue that Grace has a more powerful CPU. That's TBD, but you're likely not wrong. But you
The
can
CPU
also
is more powerful than those Zen 4 cores. That's
Oh, so what I mean is in terms of multi-threaded performance here. So you have 72 cores on Grace versus
the 24.
Zen. Yeah, so now MI308 is clocking them higher if I remember correctly. I think Grace is at 2.6. And MI300A is at 3.7. But still, I'm pretty sure in terms of if you ran Geekbench on them or Cinebench, Grace would probably end up winning. But
so can we talk about power for a second in terms of like power from the Grace side versus the Hopper side versus what power we think might look like in an MI300A? Because one of the things that's been kind of mesmerizing to watch, just as we've brought up our compute sled and with Milan and then again with Genoa, like watching how dynamic the power is on the part is pretty amazing, where it's really pretty remarkably good at when you got a bunch of cores that are idle, you'll have a core that its clock will go way up. The draw of that core will go way up, and then as you get more work, you'll see the clock drop, and the kind of the power is dissipated across all the cores. How does that work inside a Grace Hopper? Presumably, there's got to be a similar. I mean, surely you can't spin up, or maybe you can spin up all those cores simultaneously with all of the GPUs cranking, or is there some dynamic allocation of power across those?
So there's dynamic power allocation.
Interesting.
Although I would have to go back and look at the guide. MI300A, because I'm looking at our articles right in front of me, so I can just check it, is 550 watts air, 760 watts water. If I remember correctly, I believe Grace Hopper, I think out of the box is 900 or 950 watts and can go up to 1,000. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong. I would have to go check again. But
God, that's I mean, that's just a lot.
Even if we were in the neighborhood of the 500 or 600, the package footprint on either of those is wildly different.
Sure,
Those 300As, for reference, for maybe some people will understand this, is the same exact socket and footprint as like a Genoa or a Bergamo CPU. It's actually really small, and it's putting a lot of power through it.
Yeah, which I think is, I mean, I think, Jordan, you were saying that part of the power of AMD is they kind of take this core innovation and then they package it in a bunch of different ways. And I mean, I'm still very impressed that they take the same chiplet on the desktop more or less as they do on the server. The fact that they've got so much commonality. Clearly, they're very different parts, very different packaging. But this kind of the fact that they are sharing a socket in at least the physicality of the socket, the mechanics of the socket are the same.
Right,
socket.
it's not electrically compatible. Yeah,
right. I mean, that's pretty remarkable, though. I mean, just in terms of like kind of leveraging your investment on one side against another side. It's another part of what we find really interesting about the MI300A is that it just feels like you're leveraging a bunch of existing investment. I'm kind of dying to know because you all do not yet. Do you have your hands on MI300A? Did you?
I wish, but also slight correction. Adam thankfully pulled up the spec sheet. It's between 450 and 1,000 watts for Grace Hopper. So that's
between 450 and 1,000 watts. Oh, okay. Is this kind of like how California companies are required to list a salary range? So it's like, oh yeah, it's between 100,000. Yeah, there you go. Like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's a pretty wide range there.
Yeah.
So so you do not have, because Jordan, I think did I see a video of you at least palming one on? Didn't you just stick some? Yeah. Must have been tempting to just be like, you're not going to miss this one. I can just like kind of stick this galactic thing you can't really stick it in your pocket. Drop it down your shirt.
I try to every time, and I usually get tackled by PR guys at the end of the video shoot to make sure that I do bring it back. But the actual chip itself is pretty small, and my meme post on Reddit was AMD now selling heat sinks with a little silicon attached to the bottom. Get your MI300As.
Well, that is a monster heatsink. And Jordan, when you were in the office, you saw the heatsink that we have on Tofino and the Switch. I mean, that thing is basically all heat. The heatsink is gigantic. In fact, the heatsink is so big, and I think we talked about this in a previous episode, that one of the mechanical challenges that we had was the heatsink is so large that we had a moment arm issue where we were worried that a small amount of force on the outside of that heatsink could crack the PCB. So the heatsink engineering is not trivial. These are hard mechanical problems. And that heatsink that you had was just, it was very large. It was a big heatsink, and unsurprisingly, on top of a pretty hot part.
Yeah, we've learned to call it colloquially inside Storage Review the lunchbox. It appears that both AMD and Intel have gone with that kind of similar design, and it kind of feels like it when you pick it up by that little lever too. It's got a lot of mass to it, but I can't help but think that if someone were to engineer a solution to go into a smaller than a 4U form factor, you could definitely widen that out with a proper number of heat pipes.
Interesting. Yeah, what if someone could go do that?
I wonder where we can find any good engineers around here.
Exactly. I don't know. Try the next podcast. So another question I've got for you, because I think when we designed our rack to have a 15 kW power budget for the rack, and that really informed a bunch of decisions that we made. And clearly, we are not looking at 15. One is not looking at 15 kW per rack for one of these, or one is looking at a very small number of parts. You're going to have if you're drawing a kW for the part, it's like you're going to have not even close to 15 parts. But
I think you can.
kW,
I think you can fit 15 kW under my desk if it was all these.
Well, so I guess that's what I'm asking is what are people kind of changing the way they think of the folks that are deploying these by by the hundreds and thousands? I mean, you've got to be looking at 30 kW per rack, 40 kW per rack, and beyond that. Is that are people actually doing that, or are they just deploying fewer of these things? I mean, kind of square this for me from a data center perspective, because we look at the enterprise DC, and when people hear it's like, wow, 15 kW per rack, like, wow, that's at the very outer limit of our facility. And then along comes these things that are going to draw a lot more.
But I think that's a bit of the paradigm shift, right, of what's going on right now, where we've got a lot of action in the liquid space. We're at Storage Review, we're getting pretty hands-on in going further into the liquid side of things. that's more or less the direction you almost have to take, whether it's a direct to chip or in heat exchanger on the hot aisle. You're gonna run into thermal limits really quickly. Interestingly enough, this is something that a lot of crypto GPU mining stuff more or less solved a handful of years ago, and it's just starting to find its way into enterprise and traditional, which HPC or AI computational workloads are going, where you're realizing that these chips are so powerful, and yeah, you can cram in a 40 some odd U rack, you can cram 40 of these things in, but then you're looking at 1200 watts per box, and how do I get that heat out of there? And the easiest, simplest answer, especially if you're building net new, and this is the big asterisk on the entire equation, right? Is if you're building net new, the answer is go liquid. If you're retrofitting, that's where things get that question becomes a lot harder, because now we're talking about facility power or facility water, possibly retrofits to the power. There's so many variables to that if you're doing a retrofit versus a net new build. And what we're seeing is a greater willingness to do the adoption, right, of a liquid, but maybe not the perfect answer. Everybody wants to say, yes, I would love to have aisles and aisles of liquid cooled stuff, but I can't retrofit facility water. So what's the answer?
Well, yeah, and I guess, I mean, because this is a pretty exciting driver for folks, that this is like, okay, you get this potentially compelling new functionality. I mean, one question I definitely have, it's interesting that you bring up crypto, because of course I mean, clearly in contrast to crypto, I think there's a there with respect to these large language models and generative AI. Like it feels pretty unquestioningly at this point. I don't know, Adam, where do you net out that? I feel there's unquestionably.
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 I think there is some hyperbole around this being the only future of computing, or at least unproven yet. But it, like, there's 100% of there. It's going to change lots.
It's going to change lots. I mean, okay, look, I love Lisa Su. She did say it's the biggest revolution in 50 years. I'm like, ooh, 50? You mean
That's
that number?
Time.
50 is a long time.
Well, I mean, I'll give you this counter. When crypto first came out, when crypto first hit the mainstream, you didn't have enterprises like banks jumping up and down and saying, yes, I need that now. We have that happening with AI.
Yeah, right. I mean, you definitely had like a moment at Web3 when everyone's like, oh, everything's going to be on the blockchain, but no one actually knew what that meant, and no one was actually buying it. And no, I totally agree that you've got, there's definitely there's something very real here, and the kind of the question is how much of that is going to translate into the price tag. I mean, the question that we've definitely got is, it also feels like there's a stronger bias for this stuff to be on-prem, because you kind of want to let this thing loose on the data that you don't want to put on the cloud for some of these folks. I mean, talk about banks. But I don't know. I mean, Jordan, as you were pointing out, it's like these are way easier. It's way easier to rent one of these things than it is to buy it right now. What do you think the economics of kind of buying versus renting looks like for these for kind of the MI300A?
Well, I guess the leading question is it going on premises or on premises?
Well, I mean, I guess
you can't tee me up like that. It's and you and I were having a conversation the other day that was really intriguing, and it was, you don't see any snow machines leaving AWS. They're all going up to it, but there's still a lot of industry out there that either can't or won't, or just is literally unable to move the amount of data that they have to the public cloud or even a private cloud, right? So your options become kind of a, do I invest in which architecture? It's not a do I invest, it's which one. And you start approaching this, like I said, this conversation of, it's easier to build it net new. HPC racks in that sort of, where we're at with AI is not like anything we've ever seen in enterprise traditional compute. It's a very different animal. It's a different animal on the amount of throughput you need, all the way up to what you need in the data center to support it.
Interesting.
It's a complex question.
And so, and I guess it's kind of twofold, because I mean, you obviously have those reasons to run on-prem because, like, hey, I've got data that I just is not going to go to the cloud or what have you. And as you say, like, snowmobiles do not make return trips. The snowmobile being this is the AWS semi truck that hoovers up your data and then drives off to an AWS data center. I was joking when they released that if I were that NetApp should be like carjacking those things, because they're just like, that's disappearing into
Mad Max style. Yeah.
Total Mad Max style. Dan Wormenhoven out there going like, no, we're going to go bring down another snowmobile. But they did not, alas. So you got the kind of that issue of kind of the privacy issue. I'm actually just because you all are so on the economics of this stuff. Does it pay to rent versus owning these things? I mean, I know they're hard. I mean, Jordan, as you were saying, it's like just like the supply chain is a mess right now, and it's hard to actually physically get one. And they are as expensive as hell. These things are so expensive. I mean, some of these NVIDIA GPUs, like, holy mackerel, that's a lot of money. But
I can buy houses for less than a server full of these things.
I mean, literally.
Yeah. So, I mean, right. So you look at it and I think the correct answer to this, to any enterprise at any scale, is to prove it out in some sort of cloud, right? Prove it out. There's very simple ways. If your developers don't know a way to write a script to debug or to create dummy data to use that mimics real data, prove out your stuff, prove out your models in a way. Take your time and select something, like find the right chip, find the right manufacturer, find the right supplier, take your time on it. Don't rush too hard on it. And that's probably anti to everything that everybody wants me to say, but it really is the truth. It takes a lot longer to develop even if you're building on a foundational model instead of just fine tuning something, it takes so much longer to do that than just inference. And now we're talking about crazy things like NVIDIA's got Retriever, AMD's got kind of crazy stuff coming out with ROCm. We've got all these really wild, just complete stack solutions happening. And those take so much time to actually integrate into an enterprise, especially if you're something that's so big and slow moving that you can't just go to the cloud, right? As you get bigger, it's almost a feedback loop of, now I'm so big and so regulated, I can't just go do this. But taking the time to slow down and invest in, okay, how can we develop a chat model that's able to respond to a customer calling in who's complaining about their medical bill, that can actually route them to their right department without leaking HIPAA compliant, being compliant with that? How do we do that? But how do we do that with fake information? Because you can still do it, right? It's not impossible. Yeah. And that's kind of the biggest challenge right now with this entire industry, is that training data creation, that first implementation of the entire thing is so human capital expensive. It's unmatched. You're going to spend 5x what you spend on the actual hardware in human cost to develop something that can fully take advantage of it. And I think that's even an understatement.
And that's also really interesting. I do agree with you that it's kind of iconoclastic advice, because there's kind of this mania out there. I mean, honestly, a mania that I feel, Adam, we have not seen certainly in a long time. Definitely reminds me of internet mania, .com mania. I think it's much greater than, for good reason, much greater than kind of Web3 mania.
Okay, boomer.
Damn it. My kids do that. My kids love to call me a boomer to troll me. I mean, it's so effective. It's just like, it's such an effective troll. Yes.
I just remember I asked for permission on how many I could make, and I was told all of them.
But we are seeing this real mania out there, and there is this temptation to believe like, oh no, you need to move like right now. And I think it's like you need to take this really seriously. But Jordan, I think what you're saying is really interesting. It's like, no, be deliberate about it. Like, get it, explore it, start exploring it, get it working with fake data sets, and start kind of figuring it out. Because I also feel that like if this is going to be as big as its proponents, and I'm not talking about the doomers here, but I'm talking about like the proponents who believe, the people like Lisa Su who's saying that this is the biggest revolution in computing in 50 years. I don't know about that, but if it is that big of a revolution, if it's a revolution on par with, Adam, I don't think, I will spare you the coronary and I won't say that it will top spreadsheets. Because I think, the spreadsheet is hard to beat, right? As a computing revolution, like spreadsheet, word processing, personal computing, internet, I feel, internet is, I feel, tautologically unbeatable because so many of these things are made possible by the internet that I think the internet would be right to point to AI and say that actually you can't have the revolution you're having today in AI without the internet. So I think we're going to give the internet special exception. But if it's as big as that, and I think Adam, it probably is potentially maybe on par with the spreadsheet. Kind of up there, right? It's a big deal.
Yeah,
potentially. Am I going to look back on this podcast and just like puke because my
the entirety of the United States of America and
turn
from
off
the
his
largest
mic.
private company to the largest government entity to the smallest business runs on Microsoft Excel, and you can ignore it all you want, but it's the truth.
Well, no,
Yes.
in terms of like the AI being that big, because I do think the spreadsheet is extremely important, and you should know that Adam is a spreadsheet maximalist, by the way. If I haven't already kind of made that,
my love language.
For good reason. It's amazing. The spreadsheet is.
It makes a lot of sense why you guys aren't LinkedIn friends now.
We're not LinkedIn. Adam and I are not LinkedIn friends with one another.
No,
I think we are.
Oh,
Adam, we're not.
100% we are. I think
even
we are. Not only are we LinkedIn friends, I think we each have removed recommendations for each other.
Exactly. I know for a hard fact.
Well, my LinkedIn's lying to me then because it says
your
you're
LinkedIn
not.
is lying to you. Okay, so
pulling out my investigative journalism here.
Okay, no, you definitely need to. No, because Adam's got a very good memory. Because Adam, can you bring up the recommendations that we wrote for one another? Because
I don't know that we want to read them aloud.
We absolutely want to read them aloud.
No.
Well, maybe we want to read them to ourselves quickly and determine.
For the audience listening along, so Brian had to beg me to become LinkedIn friends with him, so he could promote the
that was done in a private moment. I feel that like we should not. We're going to drag this out in front of everybody. We're going to LinkedIn shame me like this. I even told you that I was embarrassed when I was asking you to be. Yes, it's true. Well, it's true. And Elon Musk did this. Elon Musk brought this upon us. I am embarrassed about my engagement with LinkedIn, and he did it because he was the one that flew my social network into the side of a mountain, and now I'm forced to go to LinkedIn. It's true. It's true.
Makes sense.
I did. Okay, so here's why I asked Jordan in what I thought was private to become LinkedIn friends. And also, what do we call it on LinkedIn? They're not friends. They're like
we're linked. I don't know.
Business associates.
Business associates. Exactly. Business associates. Because in order to be able to tag someone in a post, you need to be connected to them on LinkedIn. So that's why in what I felt was a low but private moment, I asked to connect you. I also, George, I needed you both to like accept it immediately, which I felt really bad about because I wanted to be able to tag you in the LinkedIn post because LinkedIn is now the social network of choice. And again, I blame Elon Musk and the decline of human civilization. Adam, have you found these recommendations? Are these, I can't find it easily.
I found your recommendation for me. I'm happy to read aloud, but I'll explain why I took it down too.
Oh, you took it down.
Jesus.
Yeah. Boy, sometimes the so-called doctors sure are wrong. After the accident, the doctors told us Adam's brain damage was so extensive that he would be unlikely to ever care for himself again. If they could only see him now. Sure, his speech is slurred and he drools a bit, but if the task is menial and short and there's no time pressure, Adam's your man. So this was actually like a response to a recommendation I provided for you, Brian.
Can you find that?
I'll dig it up.
I'm clearly doing LinkedIn wrong.
I was about to say.
That's not clear.
And I proudly like, this was in 2006. I proudly, signed up for that, said, fine, yeah, tell everyone that that's who I am. Until I was interviewing someone and we hired them. And then months later he had joined and he said, when we interviewed,
I've given you some menial and short tasks in which there was great time pressure, and you did great on them.
Well, thanks, pal. So when I had hired, came to me and said, when you interviewed me, afterwards I thought, his speech wasn't slurred at all.
Oh my God!
It's odd that they made this guy CTO of this company. So, what I really meant is that I wasn't testing for any kind of humor filter, apparently, in the folks I was hiring. So that's on me.
But you should know, so Jordan and George, we are so old, Adam and I, that this is like in the first days of LinkedIn. This is like how long we have been connected. And so, with every new social network, you have to understand, LinkedIn was basically like blue sky for a brief moment. And it was in this moment where Adam and I are basically like writing fake recommendations for each other. And then do
you remember when endorsements showed up? You could endorse.
Yes, you could
people, and
yes,
we were trying to bulk endorse people for things that obviously they would find laughable. But unfortunately, I feel like you had to
for anything, and so
you had to eventually accept the endorsement, which is unfortunate because then like no one's going to accept like an endorsement for animal husbandry or whatever that they've been called at, Yeah,
it was like 24 hours of really a lot of delight on LinkedIn. So yeah, you didn't realize that you were walking into a LinkedIn lore session here, but that's where we somehow.
Well, before we move off of this, Josh, you can endorse people things. My brother, who just became the VP of a different company today, he's endorsed for 4 skills: coffee, Seinfeld, walking and talking, and lunch. And apparently that's enough to get you VP of engineering at his new company.
That practically is a VP of engineering. I think you got the whole thing.
Did he not have to press a button to allow that to be?
I mean, this seems carefully curated.
I see.
Since this conversation has started, I've gotten multiple LinkedIn requests to connect. I don't know how this is going to go.
Well, you brought this on yourself. Anyway, let's just say, long story short, Adam and I are very much connected on LinkedIn. So I don't know what LinkedIn's telling you.
Yeah, I do actually. It told me we had no mutual friends. It was bizarre.
I do find it really weird when people connect with you on LinkedIn, and like I feel like maybe they've deleted all this language, but the language around the site used to really suggest that like you knew the person you were connecting to. It's like, I don't know you. Why would I? I don't know. It's inevitably people trying to sell something. So it's like, no, I don't know you. Go away. Ignore. Like.
So my favorite thing, obviously the name of the site is Storage Review. My favorite thing is when people try and come into my DMs on LinkedIn and try and sell me storage.
Adam, I have, even though it took me a long time to get it, I have the review. So so you gave me this review that I received, but then did not approve it. So I never had the dilemma. Well, I didn't think you were going to approve mine. I had no idea. I thought we were just, I thought we were. So this is October 3rd, 2006. That's a long time ago, man. George, no comment from you in terms of where you were.
To be clear, this is something that was not on the internet before, and you're now putting it on the internet by reading it.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Just checking. Just checking.
If you could please move aside, you're blocking my route to the window. Brian is a fine engineer, and we're all delighted that he was released from prison so quickly. And of course, we do enjoy gathering around while he describes in detail the time he was shanked in the gut. So it would be interesting to know, Adam, and then I, of course, replied with my recommendation for you, which then you accepted and I never accepted yours. So really, there's a deep asymmetry there that I know has plagued our relationship. So I'm really so sorry.
I'm glad we finally got this out.
We finally got this out. I think this was very therapeutic. This was
very healthy. Yes. Thanks everyone.
Thank you everyone. This has been obviously going on for, almost 20 years. So we finally got that out. I swear LinkedIn was not much older than that. I don't know when LinkedIn came out, but October 3rd, 2006 is like, maybe it was a year old. So anyway, Wait, how did we get here, Jordan? Why are we talking about what linked? How did we mention LinkedIn?
Well, I started talking a bunch of crap about it, and then all of a sudden we went to a family therapy session. So I just kind of stayed in the background from that one.
Welcome to Oxide, friends. You know, pass the tissues, please, and use I feel statements. But in terms of the, I think you got very prudent advice. I don't know how we got here, so I'm just going to try to get us back. Jordan, very prudent advice in terms of actually starting out renting GPUs on to get your feel for it. And I think sorry, this is what we're talking in terms of the scope of the revolution. If this revolution is as big as many people think it is, it's going to be with us for a long time. Then if it's as big as the spreadsheet, then the year is like 1982 with respect to spreadsheets. And like, there's a lot that's going to happen in the next 10 and 15 years. And it's not like you're not trying to like make the train here. You're trying to hack into something that's pretty fundamental. And that should hopefully take some of the panic out of, as people are trying to figure out, what do I do here? It's like, you got some time because this is going to be a big deal. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it's not only fair. I think it's an accurate judgment. Maybe possibly a little too optimistic on the whole thing, but it's not going to go anywhere, right? Like it's not going to go away. It's not Netscape. It's of the same business impact, as the spreadsheet. And enterprise, once enterprise really does figure this out in a meaningful way, we're going to see, hopefully, and this is probably the optimist glass half full in me, hopefully we're going to see really positive impacts to kind of the entire customer experience end to end, right? Nothing's more frustrating than calling into a call center agent and I don't know, or getting to a call tree and trying to say, I need to talk to billing. I'm sorry, I didn't understand. I need to talk to billing. That's just like, if we can get past that kind of just menial crap in enterprise, in the whole general implementation, like just the surface level stuff, forget what it's going to do for the actual innovation behind the scenes of an engineer who can go and talk to decades of documentation and knowledge that's been put down by other folks. Just that surface level customer service side, it's going to be wonderful.
It'll be a big deal. That's going to be transformative. What do you see in terms of the current impediments to this? Because I do feel that this has been a little bit like programming your calculator. Even as good as CUDA is, it's a very different model. When I kind of assume the ubiquity of accelerated compute, it's hard not to see a model like the MI300A or like Grace Hopper, where you've got general purpose CPUs living alongside of accelerators. What is your take on that in terms of what the future, what this means for the future of accelerated compute?
That's complex, right? Because you look at it from an architecture standpoint, it's really interesting. It's super compelling. George and I could probably talk for 3 hours on that. And then you move
article
a
coming
level
soon.
Yeah, I believe he's got one. You move a layer up from that and you get to kind of that, okay, well, how do we employ this as a tool thought process? And you start looking at, okay, we've got, some really noisy models or algorithms that really need to kind of go back and forth between that general purpose. And you're leaning into some really interesting topics there. And out from there even further, you kind of touch on the stuff I just did, which is, how does this actually affect? I think there's a lot of fear mongering and a lot of they're taking our jobs type thoughts around this kind of thing, but I think we're so far off from something like an AGI that actually could do that could actually replace warm chairs, that it's not anything folks need to worry about. It's more of a, how does this help everybody get a little bit better at their day to day? Like,
in
you got me monologuing.
Oh yeah, well I've got some opinions.
If I could interject here,
No,
I kind of have to agree with what's being said in the live chat right now. And if you look at the percentage accuracy for smaller models, which is realistically because trying to train these trillion plus size parameter models, very, very intensive, right? Not just in terms of compute, but also in terms of memory, bandwidth, and capacity. Only really the big players can do that right now. So if you start looking at sort of the 7 billion parameter models, their accuracy is something in the 40% range. Like, you're looking at it. It's maybe a help if you can train it to be a very specific sort of model. But
yeah, that's
other
what
than that, trying to train a general purpose model on just 7 billion parameters is, I would argue, a fool's errand.
A fool's errand. Okay, so this is really interesting, George, because I agree with you that it does feel like, we have taken this, humanity, for the last 3 years, it's been a very, very, very brute force approach of just like more parameters, more parameters, more parameters. It feels like the breakthroughs recently have been in the stuff that's got smaller parameters and a little more focused, and how you can actually, like, it feels like there's a lot of focus on efficiency, which kind of leads me to my question for you, which is, ultimately the power bill did catch up with a lot of the crypto mining. Is the power bill going to be part of the calculus here in terms of like, wow, if we, training that model, there's a huge amount in terms of physical plant for that 7 billion parameters, but then there's also just a huge amount of power that went into that. And are we going to begin to really, because I think, Adam, you and I have been waiting for our entire careers for people to really start thinking about the power consequences of their software decisions. And it feels like for the GPU or for accelerated compute and for AI workloads, that moment may be here just because it's so cost prohibitive. Is that, George, do you think people are going to really start thinking about the power dissipation of training a given model?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you sort of already hear talk about it, of just how much power OpenAI needed to train GPT-4, right?
Yeah.
It just staggering amounts of power was needed. And while GPT-4 is good, can it replace a human? But not, in my opinion, no. And if that's sort of where you're having to go to replace a person, just the power budget isn't there. If you consider that a human consumes about 100 watts, and what a human can do in that 100 watts is absolutely staggering compared to what compute can do in many cases.
Yeah.
So it's
very clear that our brains have got a very different compute model, at least from I mean, we're obviously not silicon and not air cooled, we're goo cooled, water cooled.
Gross.
I mean, I think that like and I think what I feel I'm seeing more of out there is, I mean, because I think we need to get past this, like the doomerist nonsense. It's just, I mean, it's such nonsense, and kind of accepting that you need to have, Jordan, you mentioned kind of the HIPAA compliance and so on, that safety needs to be a part of the way you kind of think about these things, especially if you're going to have them be generative. But I just feel like there's so many, I mean, the problem that I mean, Adam, I know you and I have both got kind of our little problems that we're interested in, but I mean, I'm so interested in letting this stuff loose on technical documentation to do things that are, to use it as a much more informed search effectively. And
I mean, we're kind of rolling out some of our internal problems. Like, we've written I don't know how many words, a couple million words. What do you think?
A lot. Yeah.
in terms of the specification of all the different aspects of the machine. I mean, I think you're speaking for me as well when you think like, couldn't an AI kind of help me figure out the truth here? And maybe even like have some citations so it couldn't invent too many hallucinations that I couldn't fact check.
Yeah, I mean, I
know-
think so. And so what Adam was referring to is kind of we've got our technical documentations and these things that we call requests for discussion, RFDs. And I mean, I would love to let an LLM kind of loose on these things to help us as we are, help us find inconsistency. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff where it's like, actually, like hallucinations are fine because we're just going to kind of fact check this stuff. It's like it's not a huge waste of time to be told that. And if you can find some stuff that's otherwise hard to find, that's kind of interesting. So sorry, Jordan, I cut you off there.
No, I was going to kind of interject just for a second in the conversation, right? So, and I think this is because of my own personal biases. I view things like ChatGPT, 3.5, 3, 4, any version. I view those more as a tool, right? They're not an intelligence; they're a tool. I was wondering, I know we're kind of at the top of the hour here, but if everybody's okay with it, we could go down kind of a thought experiment route with this whole thing. I'm seeing I just tuned into the chat for the first time and it's triggered me. For the boomers in the crowd, that means I'm getting energized by their feedback.
Lordy.
Just to go down a thought experiment.
Jordan, if you keep this up, I'm gonna have to actually we'll do a little like because this is the way to get a millennial back is millennials don't realize that they've actually like kind of quietly aged, and there's an entire generation behind you that has some comments on the way. So we'll do some little Gen Z slang quiz later.
No, I was just curious. Like, if we look at this as more of a thought experiment, right? I'm sure it's been talked about and brought up 100 times, but if you look at it more of a tool, right? How many tools have been invented throughout mankind's history that people have been fearful of, either the cost or the harm that could potentially happen, or the anything, right? Any new tool that has come out and been invented by mankind, there's always been a certain amount of pushback. And for me personally, right, aviation is a big connection for that. And, in the very early days of lighter than air, and they were using balloons, oh, man is not meant to go, more than 7 feet off the ground. Like, there was just wild stuff that was being written and printed and talked about. I'm just curious, if we look at it through a lens historically of that kind of caliber of a game changer, like aviation or electrification, how does this parody those types of innovations? And if we look at those as a playbook.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that there is going to be less. I think the demographic that is concerned about the AI doom is a pretty small demographic, like a very small demographic. You get outside of technologists and start talking about doomerists, you sound like you're off your rocker. You go talk to your kid's basketball coach about AI doomerists. They're just be like, what are you talking about? Like, can you get your kid on time to practice? That's what I'm actually asking you.
Right? Are they in the room with you right now? These doomers?
Absolutely. I mean, it just sounds so unhinged. And I think that this is going to be, and I think you can easily make the argument that this is this will not be. I mean, there are other innovations that are broader in terms of their scope. I mean, electrification is one that obviously electrification and rail and aviation, and I mean, there are a bunch of things that really, very materially impacted people's lives. And I think this could be there, maybe, in certain regards. I mean, I can tell you in some regards it's already there. I mean, the ability to, I've said this before, but when my father-in-law passed away, the ability to go to Google Photos and pick up every photo that I'd ever taken of my father-in-law instantly was, that was in 2017. That was a moment for me. It was like, okay, there is like real here, and it's going to have a real impact on people's lives. And so I think that I would say also, Jordan, the flip side of that, just for whatever it's worth, to give you the other side of it is, I think, yes, every technological revolution has been feared at some level. I think that just about every technological revolution has also been abused. And I think that, and I wrote a blog entry on this somewhat recently about what punch cards can teach us about AI safety. If you look at the role of IBM, I read Edwin Black's IBM in the Holocaust, and the role that punch cards played, or the very important role that punch cards played for the Nazis. These technologies can, and that's not a reason to not develop them. That's just you got to be really clear-eyed about these technologies are going to be. Some folks are going to want to be using them with reckless abandon. Some folks are going to fear them. We want to be kind of in the moderate middle, especially for the revolutionary ones, where we want to appreciate their power and we want to understand and learn how to use them responsibly. I think it's kind of I'll get off my soapbox on that one. So yeah, we've been, needless to say, we actually got an entire episode on the AI doomerists that Adam, I think we've done a good job resisting the temptation of going back to the well on. I
think we don't make every episode all about that, so I think we're doing pretty well for us.
I just love your pause. It's like I think we're doing pretty well. Okay. It's great to hear that you believe that. That's important. So,
well, I tell you, I was looking for the mute button, but we both know that's not true.
We both know that's true. We're gonna, and actually, Adam, maybe this is a good tee up for our we're gonna have a predictions episode. So Jordan and George, we do we've got a little Oxide and Friends tradition that we started. When did we start this, Adam? In 2022, maybe. Something like that. Yes, that must be right.
Yeah, January 22. Yeah,
of doing predictions. So you can go check out our past predictions in 2022 and 2023. I think we can safely say, Adam, that we're going to have some AI related predictions in 2024.
That safe prediction for sure. Barely a prediction.
Exactly.
So what bookie is underwriting those?
Yeah, well, so you should go listen to the past recordings. We've got some good ones out there. So those are so we are. This is going to be. I think we are. We're out next week, right? We're out for the next.
That's
2
right.
weeks.
We're out for the next couple of weeks, right?
So this is it for 2023. We are bidding adieu to George and Jordan. You are here with us as we wave goodbye to 2023. I think it's safe to say that it has been. SVB was this year, Adam. Does that feel like? Doesn't that feel like? Doesn't it feel ridiculous?
That's wild. Yeah, that's. I can't believe that. I mean, it feels like it was at least 3 years ago, but yeah, it's been a busy year.
It has been, yeah. So and George and Jordan, I know the SVB Silicon Valley Bank, the Silicon Valley Bank failure was a notable event in 2023. That feels like it was a notable event in like 1923 because it feels like it was so long ago. But that was this year. So it's been a hell of a year, and the year certainly there's been a lot this year, and hoping everyone will bring their predictions with them for what will be the first episode in January, right? Adam, do you have the date on that in front of you by any chance? I think you put it on the calendar already.
I did. If you go up to the events tab, it will even tell us.
It must be January 8th, right? It'll be January 8th.
There we go. January 8th, 5 p.m. Pacific. Also, the 100th episode of Oxide and Friends. So doubly special milestone.
That's right. That's a big milestone.
Yeah.
So Jordan, sorry if you may have kicked off more than you intended to there. But so would encourage folks to be noodling on their predictions. Go listen to the past predictions from 2022 and 2023. We'll be doing a checkup on that. See how RISC-V in the data center is doing. I'm trying to think of what some of the other big themes. Adam,
RISC-V in the data center.
Exactly. So I think Laura's still got some years to run on that though. And
that's right.
So
we had some Discord predictions, Web3 prediction. Web3 was very popular last year, I think, in terms of
in 2022.
Predictions.
Yes.
Oh yeah, is that right?
Yeah.
Jeez. Okay.
Yeah,
oh yeah, you're right. Jeez.
I know we're in a time warp over here. But so our 100th episode, that's gonna be a lot of fun. So But George and Jordan, any kind of closing thoughts for us on the MI300? Kind of we had asked in a Betteridge's Law of Headlines style if this is the future of accelerated compute. It does feel like we did get a glimpse of the future here from both in terms of this and Grace Hopper from NVIDIA. It does feel like the future is upon us. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely took a turn a little bit there and kind of got down the AI road, but I think we kind of all are in consensus here that this is a very intriguing product and it's gonna give us a lot to offer.
Well, we're so at Oxide, as folks know, we do not have an accelerated compute product, but this is a building block that we obviously have our eyes on. Very excited that it's open. Excited that AMD has embraced Ethernet as the interconnect as opposed to proprietary interconnects. That's a great move, I think, and it's exciting stuff. So,
actually, just the last comment that I just saw in chat. Actually, I personally, I think MI300A is going to be more in the sort of traditional HPC realm than for the AI realm.
Oh, interesting.
That's sort of my prediction. Is it if you want to knock that down as a prediction, is I think MI300A is going to be much more popular in the HPC space, and MI300X is going to be the sort of AI
go-to
side.
That's interesting. Can you elaborate on that just a second? Because I think that's what is kind of what do you see as the difference between those workloads, and why is a particular fit for one and not the other?
So, if you look at a lot of HPC code, a lot of it is stuff that was written before I was born, before probably a lot of folks in the chat were born, back in the 70s and the 80s. And a lot of that code not only can't be moved forward to GPUs, but they're very memory bandwidth hungry. So that CPU component on A will do wonders for a lot of that code. I know we were using basically.
But for AI-based problems, it feels like that's also a win. Is that not also a win to have your general purpose compute sitting next to your accelerated compute?
But for them, it's less. They care. They're already accelerated, so they don't care as much about what's happening on the CPU side.
Interesting.
They're almost all just GPU dependent code, right? And what they care about is memory capacity and memory bandwidth. Now, in terms of memory bandwidth, they're A and X are equal, but X has more memory capacity, which is what the AI folks are really, really want in order to fit all those big models into.
And are you talking about the training side or the inference side, or both?
Both the training and the inference side. Yeah, so I see MI300A as the HPC and MI300X as the AI. But
interesting. Yeah, it feels to me that if this is going to be a ubiquitous part of compute, that we want it to be as close as possible to our general purpose compute, and that having it sit out there as a peripheral is going to be it's going to continue to get in the way. The split between these is going to continue to get in the way, but maybe not. Maybe that's maybe the ending point for these AI workloads will be to sit on the kind of the disjoint accelerators. And just for the reasons you mentioned, George, just getting a bit more memory or what have you, or being able to dedicate all of that to the workload. All right, well, I don't think this is a pretty good roundup here. Interesting part for sure. Something to keep an eye on. A lot of interesting trends out there, and a great 2023. So, thanks for spending your 2023 with us, you all, and we will see you in 2024 with lots of great predictions.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bet, guys. All right. Adam, see you in 2024.
See you, Brian.